The lilies smelled like a funeral long before the truth died between them, their white throats lifting like trumpets to announce a grand arrival that never came, only the quiet procession of endings that moved through a house on soft, practiced feet. He heard her keys before he saw her, that bright jangle he used to anticipate like the first line of a favorite song. Today it struck like a fork scraping porcelain, a wrong note that made his molars ache and his chest tighten. "Honey, I'm home," she called with a brightness that wobbled, the syllables lacquered in something shiny and false, the way a cheap frame tries to pass for gold. He didn't look up, not yet. He ran his thumb along the edge of his book, feeling the feathering of the pages like 1,000 paper breaths, and fixed his eyes on a paragraph he wasn't reading. "Oh, look," she said, heels clicking closer, "I got you some lilies. I know how much you love them." The lie landed with the precise weight of a stone dropped into still water, sinking, sending concentric circles he could almost see widening on the floor. He looked up finally and assembled a small, tight smile that felt like folding a piece of stubborn paper into a shape it didn't want to become. "They're beautiful, Sarah." The words were a key turning in a lock he had already unlatched. She crossed the living room, vibrant summer dress fluttering against beige walls that had always made color look louder than it was. Her hair was perfect, every strand trained, glossy, obedient. The vase chimed against the coffee table, a bright sound that made the silence brighter still. When she turned, the color left her face so cleanly it was like someone had wiped it away with a cloth. Her mouth parted. Where is it?" He took in the new blank above the fireplace. The hooks were gone. The wall wore its emptiness like a scar that had learned to look like skin. "What's missing, Sarah?" he asked in the careful, distant tone of someone speaking through glass. He wanted her to shape the word, to feel what it did to her lips on the way out. "The picture," she whispered. "The wedding picture, where is it?" He closed the book. Abraham Lincoln's face disappeared under his palm, and set it down on the table, beside the vase, beside the lilies that dreamed of being trumpets and only managed to be grief. "I took it down," he said. She began to pace. The rhythm of her heels carved a metronome into the air, keeping time for something that would not be sung again. "Why?" "Because a picture is supposed to capture a moment in time," he said, leaning back, eyes steady. "A snapshot of a promise, and that picture, it's a lie." She recoiled as if the word carried voltage. "What are you talking about?" The veneer split. Underneath was panic, thin and flashing. "It doesn't represent who we are anymore," he said, and though he felt like a bridge that had already fallen into the river, his foot still finding empty air where wood used to be. Silence opened, wide and soft-edged. He let it. He had learned how silence could be a room if one stayed in it long enough. "You know," she said, not a question, every syllable a beat of cold water down the spine. "Yes," he said. He didn't tell her about the burner phone beneath the purse lining, the messages bright as flares in the dark, every late-night call another stitch snipped from the seam of their life. He didn't tell her about the photographs, the shadowed corners of hotel lobbies, the way his own hands shook pressing the shutter and still found focus. "How long?" Her voice was paper-thin, light catching the fibers. "Long enough." Who is he?" she asked, the question almost childish in its hope that a name could be an answer. "Does it matter?" he said. "His name won't change the fact. Facts everywhere, like glass spilled across a floor, glittering and unwalkable." She sank onto the couch, her hands covered her face. The lilies watched with their pale, trumpet mouths mute heralds. "I don't know what to say," she sobbed, and the sound was pure and raw and very late. "Don't," he said. "Just listen." He placed the small, flat box on the table, the cardboard scuffed, the brown string knot neat and final. When she untied it, the air seemed to lean in. Bank statements, phone records, itineraries, photographs, facts with dates, facts with numbers, facts with the exact hour a promise was stepped around and not over. She sifted through the sediment of her double life, and with each page her face paled further, like someone slowly lowering a dimmer switch. The hope in her eyes went out with a soft click. "Everything," he said, voice low but clear, so clear it felt like cold water. "Every lie, every secret rendezvous. It's all there." "I made a mistake," she whispered, the word mistake so small it looked almost sweet in her mouth, like a pet name that had lost its owner. "This wasn't a mistake," he said, the softness of his voice carrying the weight of a mallet. "This was a choice, a long, deliberate choice to break what we said we would not break." She didn't argue. The argument had already been lived in other rooms, with other shoes, against other walls. "I'm leaving," he said, standing. "I've packed a bag. I've filed for divorce. There's a letter in there from the lawyer, the prenup." The day had been a photograph, now it was a document. He walked to the door. He didn't look back. Some refusals are the truest goodbyes. Outside, the air met him like cool cloth against a fever. The relief that rose in him wasn't joy, but it was cousin to it. It breathed. He drove away with the quiet hum of his own resolve in the car, the house shrinking in the rearview into a blank square of beige and white. He could still smell lilies even with the windows down. Memory is stubborn that way. He didn't know what would come next, only that it would be his, and that the blank above the fireplace would stay blank for as long as it needed to teach him how to stop reaching for places that no longer held his weight. The cheap apartment had windows that stuck halfway, as if they were withholding air out of principle, as if they didn't trust him yet with sky. The place smelled faintly of someone else's cooking and an old refrigerator trying to keep up. He liked it for what it didn't promise. He liked it for the view of a brick wall that did not lie about being a wall. He put his bag down and sat on the edge of the new bed, the mattress a little too springy, like it didn't know yet how to cradle a weight. He listened to the radiator tick, metal settling into its own small contracts, honest about the heat it could give. Night arrived early through the narrow alley. He made dinner without looking at a clock. Eggs and toast, butter melting into sun-yellow pools, he ate standing. The plate clicked faintly against the counter, a sound anchored to now. It took him 2 days to hang anything on the wall, not photographs, a calendar. Cheap paper, a thin red grid that made the weeks look like something a person could bear one box at a time. He marked court dates. He marked the day he would return to the house for his remaining things. He marked a reminder to water a plant he had not yet bought. On the third night, he dreamed of the wedding picture. In the dream, the frame was empty, but the glass was heavy in his hands, and when he tilted it toward the window, the glass caught light and flung it around the room, and he woke with the impression that he had been standing in a rain of brightness with his eyes closed. Work was a bridge over the days. He walked it carefully. He answered emails. He drafted memos with sentences that clicked together like clean teeth. He was polite. When someone asked, "How are you?" he found there was a space between the first beat of the question and the expected answer where a person could stand and breathe. He stood there. He said, "I'm okay." It was not a lie because it was not a claim on the future. On Saturday morning, he went back to the house to collect clothes, books, the coffee grinder he loved irrationally, a box of old journals that he both did and did not want to keep. He'd called ahead. She'd texted back, "I'll be out." He didn't answer. The house looked expensive in a way that always made him feel vaguely guilty, like he was trying to sit very still in a chair he didn't want to scratch. He didn't take off his shoes. The lilies had browned at the edges, turned inward as if ashamed. He took the vase to the sink and poured them out. The flowers hit the basin with a sound like paper. He washed the vase until it squeaked. He left it upside down to dry. In the closet, the absence of his shirts felt louder than the presence of hers. He folded slowly. You learn about yourself watching your own hands. He found the old college hoodie that had survived so much laundry its letters had become a soft blur. He pressed it to his face, and for a second he was 20 again, broke and hopeful and hungry in the way hunger pointed you toward what mattered. In the bottom drawer under a sweater he'd never seen her wear, he found the burner phone. He powered it on. It lit up with insistence and then began to flood itself with ghosts. Messages stacked bright white and blue, names he didn't know, nicknames that made him feel like a strange version of the man he had been standing right there reading. He turned it off. He put it in the box with the journals. He did not know why he took it. He only knew that sometimes evidence is not for court. Sometimes it is a mirror you're brave enough to look into once and then never again. He took down the last of what had been his, and then he stood in the living room and looked up at the blank square above the fireplace. The wall had the newness of freshly healed skin, ghost stitching. He realized he had wanted to see this. Proof that he had actually removed himself from the narrative she would tell about the house. The front door opened. He froze with a stack of books in his arms that suddenly felt like an armful of bricks. She stepped in, stopped, and swallowed his name as if it were a pill she couldn't bear to take without water. "I didn't think you'd still be here." "I'm leaving," he said, and then because it was true in more ways than one, soon. She looked thinner. Or maybe it was that the light found her differently now, that he wasn't bending it with his attention. "Can we talk?" He set the books down. The soft thud made the air hum. About what? She took a step, stopped. About everything. It was such a large word she couldn't hold it. It slid from her hands and shattered between them into years, mornings, fights, jokes, Tuesdays, stained rings on the coffee table, passport stamps, silence. "There's not much to say that isn't already said." He gestured vaguely toward the memory of the brown string. "I know." She looked at the lily's ring in the sink, the brown petals clinging to the strainer like the last of a season. "I loved you," she said, past tense, as if the grammar could save them. He waited. Sometimes the hardest thing is not to fill the silence with yourself. "I don't know how I got there," she said, voice small. "It was like I stepped off the path to pick a flower, and when I looked up the forest had moved." He almost laughed, and then realized the sound that came out of him was not laughter but a dry exhale, as if his ribs were wind chimes in a house with all the windows shut. "You walked," he said. "You kept walking." She flinched. He saw the girl she had been flicker through, the one with chipped nail polish and a fierce tenderness that used to make him feel chosen. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time it sounded like it hurt her mouth to make room for the words. "Sorry is a bridge," he said. "It doesn't turn the river into land." She nodded, tears rimmed but held, like she was trying to prove she could carry water without spilling any. Are you going to tell your mother?" "I'm going to tell the truth," he said, "to the people who deserve it." He picked up the books, he walked past her. He felt the gravity between them try to assert itself, the way mass calls to mass, but gravity, too, has limits. Beyond a certain distance, the pull weakens until the body remembers it is allowed to drift. In the car, he put the box with the journals and the burner phone on the passenger seat. The phone vibrated once, a startled insect. He ignored it. He drove back to the apartment, where the windows stuck halfway and the radiator told the truth about heat, and the calendar waited with its red little boxes like mouths open to be fed. He fed them, one day, then the next. Weeks curled around the edges of his life and softened. He bought the plant, a snake plant that would forgive him for forgetting, and put it on the sill where it could learn the light by heart. He learned the shape of his own breathing in the mornings. He learned that coffee tastes different when it's only for one cup, and the quiet is not a waiting room but a room. He began running along the river just as the city woke, the early light writing soft gold letters across the water. He liked the way his body learned and relearned its own language, the way effort gave way to rhythm, and rhythm to a wordless mercy that met him right where the breath hurt and then gave it back. On a Tuesday, his lawyer called with a voice like file folders sliding into place. They would push for mediation. It would be cleaner. He agreed. Clean had become a religion he could practice. On a Thursday, he found himself outside a gallery he had never noticed before, a small white room with art hung like pauses. He went in because the door was open, and because inside there was a painting of white lilies, each petal rendered with such compassion that the flowers did not look like trumpets but like listening ears. He stood in front of it and felt something loosen in him that was not forgiveness, not yet, but something adjacent to it, something with a door in it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice beside him said, low, unassuming, shaped like respect. He turned. A woman stood there in a denim jacket, her hands tucked into the pockets as if to keep them from making claims. Her hair was gathered in a loose knot that looked like it could come undone if one breathed too hard. "It is," he said, and knew he had said more than he meant to. "I'm Maya," she said, not offering a hand, only offering a fact. He appreciated that. "Evan," he said, and the syllables felt solid, like he'd set a small brick on the ground between them, and it had made a sound like a beginning. Maya did not ask about marriage or lilies or the particular gravities of beginnings and endings. She asked about books. It turned out both of them loved the quiet wildness of biographies, the way a life can be arranged between covers and still spill everywhere if you read it right. They began to meet by accident and then, in the ordinary way of persistence, by design. They walked the city slow, the way one learns a foreign tongue by listening to its breath. She showed him the places that held her on the hard days. A bakery that smelled like childhood on purpose, a narrow park where the benches leaned into the trees like confidences, a mural that changed with the season because teenagers could not keep their hands off paint and hope. He showed her the river at sunrise, the exact stretch where the light discovered itself on the water for the first time every morning. They spoke simply. It was a relief to discover sentences that didn't try to win. He told her eventually about Sarah. He put the facts in order, not to prove a case but to tell himself, again, he had survived the telling. Maya listened the way the lilies in the painting had listened. Not to judge, not to fix, only to witness the shape of the grief until it learned the shape of the room and could be set down in it. "Do you hate her?" Maya asked, not to steer him, but to let him hear his own answer with the door open. "I don't know," he said. "Some days I think hate would be easier to carry. It sits so straight in the spine. But then I remember her laughing at something dumb I said in the grocery store, and hate gets confused and wanders off." Maya nodded like a person who trusted complexity. "Maybe the point isn't to carry it. Maybe the point is to notice when it set itself down and not pick it back up." They kept walking. The city changed clothes. Summer bruised into early fall, and the air learned teeth again. Mediation was a room with glass water pitchers and chairs that insisted you sit up straight. Sarah sat across from him with her lawyer, an older man whose eyebrows looked like hedges. Evan's lawyer stacked folders like small protective walls. The conversation was a slow unknitting of a sweater they had both worn. It turned sofa and rug and car into columns and signatures. Sarah looked at him only once, directly. In her eyes was a storm that did not ask for rescue, only for acknowledgement that it was weather and it would pass or it would not, but in either case the sky would remain. "I'm sorry," she said in a voice meant only for him, and for a moment he was certain he heard what she meant. Not fix me, not absolve me, only this is the truth and I can say it with my whole mouth now. He inclined his head, a bow so shallow it could have been a nod. He did not accept or reject. He let the word be a shape on the table among other shapes. After, he walked to the river and watched the water carry everything too heavy to name. Maya found him there without calling ahead, as if his grief had given off a small, specific signal only she could hear. They sat, shoulders not touching. It was a small mercy, to be near and not asked to perform nearness. "You did it," she said. "I did it," he said. In his chest, a quiet room opened. He began to paint. The lilies in the gallery had made him remember his hands used to know how to put color where it could teach light a different lesson. He set up a canvas in the corner of the apartment near the window that stuck at the hip, and he painted rectangles first, honest shapes. Then he let the brush wander. He was surprised by how often his hand found white and then dirtied it, how often he mixed in a little ochre, a note of shadow, the way truth never stays bright for long. One evening, while the paint still skinned over in its tray, the burner phone buzzed from the box in the closet where he had put it, as if a ghost had learned to find the light switch. He took it out. The screen woke with that insistent, bright ignorance of context devices excel at. A message blinked, "Please, one conversation." He stared at the words until they uncoupled from meaning and became shapes. He put the phone on the counter. He went back to the canvas, and the air between the two objects felt charged like storm heat. Later he texted, "Tomorrow, noon, the cafe on 7th. He did not know until he typed it that he would grant himself this. The right to choose the room where the last echo would be allowed to sound and then be done. The cafe smelled like ground beans and cinnamon and small plans. Sarah arrived 5 minutes early, as she always had when it mattered to her. Her face looked like a house after a party, traces of joy and exhausted mess only strangers would notice. "Thank you," she said, sitting. Her hands sought each other and clutched. He waited. The barista called out names that were not theirs. A child laughed with abandon on a milk-stained chair. Life kept happening, the most ordinary miracle. "I didn't call to ask for you back," she said. "I know that door is closed." She faltered, searching for a word that would take responsibility without begging for absolution. "I wanted to tell you that the person I became, I don't recognize her. And I'm not saying that to make you say I'm still me. I'm saying it because whatever I have to build next, it has to start somewhere true." He breathed, the breath went all the way in. "Thank you for saying that." He meant it. He was surprised he meant it. They spoke of practicalities, the last boxes, the piano, the enamel pan she loved. They did not speak of lilies. Some symbols asked to be retired with a folded flag. When they stood, she reached out and then pulled her hand back before it made a claim. "Be well, Evan." "You too, Sarah." He meant that too. Mercy is a small flame you protect with your hands when you step out into the wind. It is not for warmth, it is for sight. He walked into afternoon light that had the texture of linen. He felt the subtle give of the day under his feet, as if the earth was a generous host. He thought of Maya, of the river, of the calendar with its red mouths, and how many he had fed without even noticing the skill it took to keep going. At home, he painted over the white, not to erase it, but to teach it to hold other colors without complaint. The canvas took the lesson. He slept without dreaming of glass. The final hearing was a Tuesday that refused to dress like a climax. The courthouse smelled of bleach and paper and the faint metal tang of resolve. In the hall, people rehearsed their faces the way one practices a new accent, determined to sound convinced. He didn't rehearse. He stood by a window that offered a crooked slice of sky and watched a pigeon study a breadcrumb with scholarly intensity. Inside, the judge's voice was even and almost kind. The language of endings was fussy, but its fussiness was precise, a sort of mercy in itself. Things were entered into record, numbers shook hands with signatures. A marriage became a past tense in a ledger printed by a machine that could not care. When it was done, Sarah looked at him, and for a heartbeat they were both exactly who they had been at the beginning, two people brave enough to make promises and human enough to fail them. They inclined their heads as if to each other and to the day, and then turned away because forward is the only honest direction left once the bridge is burned behind you. Outside, the cold made his teeth ring like small silver bells. He walked without purpose and found himself at the river again, as if the water had tucked a string into his pocket and was gently reeling him home. The sky lay low and heavy, a lid on a pot, keeping the heat in. Maya arrived with 2 coffees and the kind of smile that doesn't ask a thing. "Done?" she asked. "Done," he said, and the word went out over the water and did not come back. They stood side by side. The river kept being a river in that stubborn way truth keeps being truth, whether or not anyone is looking. He told her the details he needed to say out loud so they would move from inside to air. When he was finished, the silence between them did not feel like absence. It felt like room. "What do you want now?" Maya asked, not softly and not sharply, but in the tone one uses to ask a person where they'd like to sit in their own house. He watched a gull step, decisive and comic, along the bank. He felt inside himself the new, awkward space that had appeared when the old furniture was hauled out. "I want a place where lilies don't smell like a funeral," he said, surprising himself with the honesty of the image, how completely it named his grief and his hope at once. Maya nodded. "Okay," she said, "then let's learn their other names." He began small. He bought fresh sheets the color of warm stone. He cooked for two and sometimes for one and sometimes for none, because hunger can be a companion and a teacher and an absence, all three, and none of those states require apology. He fixed the window so it would open all the way. It stuck once, and then, with a groan like an old story yielding its last secret, it gave. He painted a new canvas, larger than the others, and let white be what it is when it isn't pretending. Not purity, not promise, only a field where other colors can arrive and be themselves without competition. He painted lilies, yes, but not as trumpets and not as funerals. He painted them with dirt at their feet and insects worrying their leaves, rain bruising their petals, light forgiving all of it by making it visible. On the day the painting dried, Maya brought a frame. They hung it together on the apartment wall above the small table where he kept a bowl of keys and a sprig of rosemary because the smell was a shortcut to steadiness. The frame made a soft sound against the wall, a click like a period at the end of a sentence that had been trying too long to be a paragraph. He did not think of the wedding photo as he stepped back. He thought of the river, the calendar's red mouths fed one by one, the courthouse, the cafe, the lily in the gallery listening with all its white. He thought of a life that had refused, stubbornly and mercifully, to be over when one story ended. Sarah texted once, months later, a message that contained no hooks, only a photograph of a garden she had begun behind a small rented house. A square of soil, dark and hopeful, with shy green making a promise that did not know yet if it would be kept. "I'm trying," the text said. He typed nothing back and meant the silence as an acknowledgement and a blessing both. The seasons turned their pages. He learned the names of things he had once moved past without seeing. The different silvers the river wore under different skies, the way late autumn light can turn a brick wall into a hearth, the exact sound a snake plant makes when it grows, a silence that isn't empty if you listen correctly. He learned his name in his own mouth, free of the echo that had lived there, and it fit. On a morning that opened like a window, he woke before the alarm and lay still, listening to the building breathe, to the city yawn, to the soft high whine of the kettle deciding to speak. He tasted the future in the room the way one tastes rain in the air, certain and near. He smiled without witnesses and let the day find him where he was, no longer auditioning for a life that would not have him. He stood before the painting and breathed in the white that did not perform, the green that did not apologize, the petals that accepted their bruises as part of their shape. He reached up and straightened the frame by a fraction, unnecessary and exact, and the click it made was so small the air barely noticed, but he did. It sounded like a life lining up with itself. He poured 2 coffees. He handed one to Maya when she knocked, as if the world had suggested it. They drank at the window that now opened all the way and watched the morning slip its arm through the city. "What now?" she asked again, grinning. "Now we forget the smell," he said, "and remember the bloom." He felt the truth of it settle, not as a claim, but as an invitation he could accept again tomorrow and the next day and the next. And the lilies on the wall, ordinary and miraculous, listened. Lilies on the wall, ordinary and miraculous, listened.